Beth Marsden, and welcome to GBMC's Greater Living. Today's topic is a tough one, heart-wrenching really at times, but so important to talk about and learn more about. We're talking today about child abuse, how to spot it, how to prevent it, where we are now, and we have two experts joining us today. I want to welcome Danielle Nichols, who is the Child Protection Program Coordinator at GBMC, and also happy to have Lisa Dever, who has been with the Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office since 1992, and in 2010 she was the Division Chief of the Sex Offense and Child Abuse Division, and now she is the Chief of the Circuit Court in Baltimore County. So thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I thought we'd just have each one of you tell us a little bit about what you do so we can put that into context, and then we'll take it from there. And we'll start with you, Danielle.
Hi, so I am the Child Protection Program Coordinator here at GBMC. And so GBMC is the medical partner with Baltimore County Child Protective Services and the Child Advocacy Center. So my role here at the hospital is to help coordinate care between the children that come in and have experienced abuse or maltreatment and those agencies that are part of the child advocacy team.
And so I know you probably work very closely with Lisa, right, Lisa?
Yes, we work together. We are a team. When child abuse is reported, it goes to the Child Advocacy Center, which is a multidisciplinary team, and I'm part of the prosecutorial part of that. So I am a prosecutor. I work at the Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office, and for approximately 10 years, I headed up the Sex Offense and Child Abuse Division. Most recently, I've moved into the homicide division, but this is a subject matter that is near and dear to me, and so I was asked to present.
So I think that most people think they know what child abuse is. I'm sure there's a legal way to define it, and there are other ways to define it. So I'm going to ask both of you to sort of chime in. I know you're in different locations, but we'll start with Danielle, and I'll try to call on you so we make that so you don't step on each other when you're talking, but feel free to just jump in, and we can roll with that too. But how do we really define child abuse?
So child abuse is such a broad definition, but it's kind of broken into these different abuse typologies. So we have child sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, as well as some exposure to domestic violence or being a part of a parent's domestic violence, as well as child human trafficking.
And Lisa, is there a different way legally that you have to look at it?
Yes, so very specifically, child abuse is when somebody has care and custody of a child and or is temporary or permanent responsibility for that child, and they cause harm to that child. That's child abuse. So if a stranger off the street hits a child, that person doesn't have any relationship to that child, so that would be assault, but not necessarily abuse. But if it's a parent or a caregiver who causes harm to the child, that would be child abuse. And there's both physical and sexual abuse.
In very broad terms, where are we statistically, and you don't have to have the exact numbers, but with child abuse? I mean, over the years, if we can go back 50 years, 20 years, is it on the rise? Has it remained steady? Where are we with it?
So we have certainly consistently see child abuse. Child abuse occurs across all ethnicities, all socioeconomic statuses. Child abuse affects everybody. We are seeing the most recent data was 2018, and data showed about 700,000 children were experienced child abuse, and that number is likely underreported because of these reports are based on children telling us and telling people who are responsible for keeping them safe about their abuse experiences.
And Lisa, I mean, I know that child abuse has often been said that it's part of a cycle of abuse, and that the whole goal with advocates is to try and break the cycle and prevent it from happening to the next generation. Are we not able to do that? I mean, why are the numbers staying so consistent, in your opinion?
I think a lot of that has to do with that being, if you're talking in the physical abuse realm, right? sometimes, and we find this a lot, we call them survivor cases, where people don't necessarily talk about their abuse until they're older and an adult. If you can catch abuse when the kids are young and still children and get that child into therapy, then I think that you can break the cycle. But sometimes, parents who were abused grow up and don't understand the proper way of disciplining. Or things have changed too, right? I mean, lots of us have grown up in corporal punishment, or we were spanked as kids or hit with switches. And there are parents now who believe that's appropriate, and that's not necessarily child abuse. You can hit your child with things, but it's not necessarily appropriate nowadays. And so really as we grow older and more knowledgeable about child abuse, I think that the society is changing in what they define child abuse as well.
And of course, COVID, I think, has thrown a real wrench into everything and the way we view how we treat people, how we treat medical cases, how we treat mental health. And there was so much talk about concern about terrible family situations that where people were in their homes, they weren't able to seek help, and there was a lot of concern for spousal abuse and child abuse. And I'm wondering, now that we're coming out of this a little bit, there are less restrictions, children are back in school. What have you seen over the course of the last 2 years?
So at the hospital, we initially, when everything shut down, March 2020, we had schools were out. There was a significant decrease in the number of reports of child abuse. And we didn't have, so children often are able to go to places like school as a main place of support, and teachers and school staff are a main, they're able to be the eye for these children's safety. And so we initially saw that decline in reporting because kids weren't at school. But then eventually we saw an increase in reporting too, because teachers were able to be almost present in these children's homes through virtual learning. We also saw, when there was the decline in reporting, we saw a higher number of children with more severe injuries come to the hospital. So if we're talking about the severity of injuries caused by abuse, the smaller, less severe injuries were not being reported as much, but then we saw the more severe injuries coming into the hospital at a higher rate.
Lisa, are you seeing more cases now?
Yeah, so that is absolutely what happens. So historically, in the fall, we would get more reports, right? Because less reports in the summer of child abuse, because eyes really aren't on these kids until they're regularly going to school. And that really is what happened with COVID, is that eyes weren't on these children and people weren't reporting it. And most of our reports come through the schools. So when that wasn't happening, it really did drop. And now we are seeing, as schools are opening, more of an increase in the reports again.
Danielle, you mentioned that when you did start to see more cases come in, that they were more severe cases. And I'm wondering, when it comes to child abuse, and either one of you can answer this, does it happen usually or oftentimes in stages where the abuse will be lesser and then a little more and then a little more? So if they were isolated in their homes for so long, by the time you saw them and the world opened up again, they were more severe. Is that accurate?
I would say that typically children don't realize, so when they are having these less severe injuries or less severe incidents of child abuse, they almost might not realize that it is abuse, and parents, like Lisa had said, might not realize that this is abusive behavior. And so those weren't being reported, but then it was almost like once it was necessary to get that medical treatment for the severe injury, that was when we were seeing it. So I would say, especially, yeah, I would say with most abuses that does happen, and there is, so with physical abuse, there's going to be some smaller injuries and then it will increase, and not always. But then also with sexual abuse, you have the grooming behaviors that then lead into they build that children's trust, the family's trust, and then they sexually abuse the child. So I would say it does steadily increase.
For the general public who might be watching and want more information, maybe about people who live in their neighborhood or children they come in contact with, I don't know that we always know the signs of abuse, but what are some of the ones, and some of the ones that may be very subtle even, that we should all be aware of? Danielle, I'll have you jump in.
Sure. So I think there's a couple of different signs when we're talking about physical abuse. Certainly, if there's injuries on the child that are unexplained or their story doesn't match up to how the injury occurred or what the injury looks like, then that would certainly be a red flag. We also have these children who have experienced abuse may have some traumatic stress reactions. And so those could be things like changes in behavior, changes in sleep habits, changes in toileting habits. They could become withdrawn. They could seem more anxious, but also some children that are abused don't have these indicators. And so it can be such a hidden experience for the child. So that's why it's so important to be that safe person for the child and to listen to the child when they are are telling you something has happened to them.
And Lisa, what do you tell people who may say to you, or maybe to someone in your office, or to the Child Advocacy Center, I suspect this, or I've seen this, and from your point of view, what should people know and look out for? And then how do they go about reporting it?
Right. So I think it's really important, as Danielle said, to listen to the child. So oftentimes, if you see that there are bruises or you see that there are injuries to a child and you ask the child what happened and the child says that they fell off of a bike, that might be true. But if the injuries are in a place where it's not really wouldn't make sense for that child to have fallen off a bike and you are concerned about that, I think one of the basic principles is that you don't have to be 100% sure of what happened or even who is doing that to the child, right? But if you suspect that somebody is hurting this child, then you can either call the police or you can call social services. If you call either one of those agencies, they will work together and they will, somebody will put eyes on that family and ask questions. I think the biggest mistake that people make is that they think that something happening, but they don't want to get involved, or they're not sure, so I'm not going to report it. We get lots of reports that turn out to be nothing. But it's better to have at least have investigated it or had somebody put eyes on the situation than not to have at all. So my biggest advice would be, if it doesn't hurt to make that phone call.
Can I ask you exactly, though, Lisa, what happens? I mean, parents especially are sensitive to the stresses of being a parent. And there's, I think, a certain fear, especially not with outward abuse, something that may be suspected but is subtle, but you're not sure. There's a fear that you'll falsely accuse someone and it'll change their life and turn it inside out, and you've set the whole thing in motion for no reason. What happens if we call one of those numbers or your office gets involved?
So my office doesn't get involved. CAC, which is the Child Advocacy Center, is the place where we investigate these types of crimes. A detective from the Baltimore County Police Department and a social worker work together. They will interview the child. They will go and interview the family. Oftentimes, nothing will happen. Maybe there are no charges. Maybe they decide that the injury to the child is consistent with this story. Sometimes it's a matter of providing services or counseling for that family. We at the Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office have, in the physical abuse realm, a diversion program. So if a family member, yes, I hit my child, I was really frustrated and I shouldn't have done it, and I am so sorry, we offer them diversion. Maybe we won't charge you, but you have to complete these programs, and if you do, then we won't charge you. We understand that it's very frustrating to be a parent, but if you're frustrated when your child is 6 or 7, imagine the frustration when they become teenagers. And so if we can get into a family quicker that needs help and get them the services that they need, the better off everybody is in that family.
I think, and this is for Danielle and Lisa, but I'll start with Danielle. Services have been so hard lately. It's been hard to find providers. It's been hard to find therapists. The whole workforce is shifting. Are you finding it difficult to get people the help that they need right now?
I agree that there's a difficulty in getting those services when the family needs it. So the family is coming, if a family comes to us or to the Child Advocacy Center, they're in crisis. And if they're wanting help, they need that help now. And unfortunately, then they're having to wait for this help and they're having to wait for community services. And that is just an added stressor and an added frustration, which does not help. Um, how they react to their children and how they treat their children and how they treat their partners in their relationship. So, yeah, I am seeing that it is difficult for these families to get the support services that they need. There certainly are plenty of services available in the community, but again, there's plenty of people that need these services as well. So there is a shortage.
Sometimes it's a matter of putting the right two together, right? Um, Danielle, can you just talk about what the Child Advocacy Center actually does for the community and how we can access that?
Yeah, so the Child Advocacy Center, like Lisa mentioned a little bit ago, is a bunch of multidisciplinary team approach. They have Baltimore County Child Protective Services, Baltimore County Police Department, the state's attorney office. There's a medical, GBMC is the medical component. They have victim advocates and family advocates, as well as the mental health perspective and getting those children and families connected with the mental health services that they need. And so the goal of the Child Advocacy Center is to give children and families one place for all of their services, or to get a majority of their services, so that these families who have been through these traumatic and scary and unknown situations don't have to go from the CPS office to the police department over to get a medical exam and going to all these different offices on different days. And it's really just to help the families and the children have one place, and for the investigation to really be comprehensive, and so that everybody can meet as a team. And that way the investigation has just that better approach. Everybody is able to talk to each other. Nobody's, getting different information from different people, or it just really is a better for the investigation as well as better for the child and the family.
Elisa, we talked about some of the different forms of child abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. One topic that has been in the news for a number of years now, but I think is a hard one still for people, especially in this area, who don't see it the way you may see it, and that is human trafficking. Is that an issue in Baltimore County?
Yes, it's an issue in every county, all over the United States. Yes, it's a huge issue.
And what does that look like exactly, involving children especially?
So human trafficking is very different than child abuse. Human trafficking is somebody who is taking that child to other places for sexual services. It is a different type of investigation, and it is one that, although it is happening, is not one that is reported as often. So schools are definitely beneficial in helping identify problems when children aren't showing up to school. They're usually teenagers not showing up to school, and identifying that. But yes, it's less reported now than it was, but it is still an issue.
Danielle, it sounds like, and Lisa too, teachers play such an important role as being the eyes on, boots on the field, what have you. They've had such a challenging last 2 years. It's a lot to put on them. Do they have help from your organization or others in recognizing child abuse, and are they well versed in what to do?
Yeah, so actually the entire state, the Maryland Center for School Safety, we have a partnership with them here at GBMC, and then the SAFE program, where we do trainings with all of the SROs, the school resource officers. Also, the Baltimore County school system trains their teachers and all of their staff about recognizing child abuse, what to do when they suspect child abuse. They have education with their school counselors as well as the school nursing staff. So they are very well trained, and we do have a partnership with them, and not just with Baltimore County, but statewide as well.
Have you, from your perspectives, has COVID-19 given you sort of a new idea, or any new ideas about, I'm thinking of telehealth and how we've used that over the last 2 years. Has it given you any ideas about using technology in new ways to confront the problem of child abuse?
I think technology has been really beneficial in reaching other professionals and parents. So, the adults in this matter in providing education and training on child abuse, what to do when we suspect something, education about recognizing the symptoms, as well as trafficking. So, it has really expanded who we can reach in providing that education to. There are also, counselors have been able to move to a more virtual setting, and that has possibly let them see more children because they're virtual and they're not having to accommodate travel time. So I do think it has had a lot of benefits. I think there's also, we've seen the benefits of children being back in school and being back completing in person events and counseling. So it has its positives, but there's certainly the benefits to the in person services being available now as well.
Lisa, I know that this topic is obviously a passion for you, and you're well versed in it over the years. And I was just wondering how important it is, and how you find the relationship between your offices and your group and the board you sit on, and the hospitals, especially GBMC, and how that whole community comes together and works together in communicating when there's a problem.
I really think that in Baltimore County, partnering with GBMC, which we have for the last several years, has been such an immeasurable change for us. We've always worked as a team. Detectives and social workers work together. They work very closely with our office, and we need that medical arm, right? I don't know if a broken arm is consistent with the story that the parent is telling, but the medical piece does. And so it has been such a great change for us. And it really is a team effort. No one person or department does it all on their own. We really work as a team. And if there is abuse that's happening, but we feel at the state's attorney's office that we cannot charge because we can't prove who is doing it, there are still services that are out there through the Department of Social Services that can help this family. So just because a person's not charged does not mean that things aren't happening to help the family.
I know from both of your perspectives, I mean, the caseloads can be so heavy and the problems can seem so big that you need help. And I know that there are volunteer groups of adults who can step in and be of help through certain avenues and certain groups and nonprofits where they can support a child or support a family. Is there anything you would like to say about ways that people who may be watching could get involved?
I think, yeah, just making sure that you are involved in the children in your lives, in being involved and active in their life, being a safe and supportive person for them, as well as educating yourself on these, the signs of child abuse, what to do when you suspect child abuse. Here at GBMC, we are the Child Protection Program at GBMC. We partner closely with our SAFE program at GBMC and the Child Advocacy Center. There's programs that they are running and coordinating to help provide those counseling services and advocate services for these families.
Lisa, is there anything that you would like to say? I don't know that this has been at the forefront lately. There have been so many other issues, as there always are in the world, it seems. But how do we get this topic really out there again? Or what would you like to say about it?
So I think that oftentimes when I meet with families and parents, they believe that nothing's happening. My child would tell me if something was happening. And I have a really close relationship with my child. And if they were being sexually or physically abused, I would know. And I don't think that that's always the case. You can have a very close relationship with your child, but your child wouldn't tell you when things are happening. So my best advice is that people, as a parent, just listen to your child. And if start the conversation, then be there to listen and then take whatever steps you need to keep your child safe. And also talk to your children. I think that people are so afraid to talk to their children about the body parts and what body parts can be touched and not, and what private areas are, and to use the proper words for those body parts. And you can't start that too young. And I think parents don't want to use the proper terminology. But if somebody is touching a child on their vagina, you need to know that that's the part that they are touching. And if you call it a cute name, then a teacher or somebody might not know that when the child actually says something. The other thing is that when abuse happens when kids are really young, really in, before the age of 9 or 10, they don't always understand what's happening to them. They might be told to keep it a secret and not to tell anybody. And so it's really important to have these open conversations with your kids that nobody is supposed to touch certain parts of your body. And if they are, it should never be kept a secret. And you should always tell me or tell somebody about what's happening, me being the parent. Your child is not too young to have those conversations. It should happen as soon as they're starting to talk and know their body parts. They should know the right names for the body parts and know that people should not touch them.
Well, Lisa Dever and Danielle Nichols, thank you both for joining us today. And really, thank you so much for where you're putting your energies and your work. And I mean, from my point of view, if you can save one child, that is a career worth having. And I'm sure you've saved many and helped many families. So thank you both. And thanks for talking about a difficult topic and making us think about it again in maybe new ways. And before we go, can we put up that number again for social services just in case? There it is. And so if you want to report a suspected case of child abuse, even if you sort of think it or something doesn't seem right, there's the number to call, and there is help available. So thanks for being with us today on Greater Living.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.